Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and process is what we're going to be talking about right now. So thank you for being with us as we do look around the globe and looking at the vistas of trees and giant trees, champion trees, all kinds of trees. And we have a gentleman who is the world's leading expert in this whole topic. This is David Milarch, who is the co-founder of what's called Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, AATA. And sitting right beside me is Richard Lewis. Richard's our guest here in the studio, and he's here in case we lose phone contact with David, because David's coming in by telephone, and he's the president of the Winfield Group and Technology Marketing Officer of Augur Marketing. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
David, welcome to Emerald Planet TV.
Well, it's nice to be with you today.
That's great, and we have your logo up here, and it's absolutely fantastic. But tell us a little bit about AATA, what it means, and a little bit of its history.
Well, Archangel Ancient Tree has been around for 8 or 9 years now. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and it's our task and our mission to preserve the genetics of the last of the great trees on planet Earth. So we're cloning the largest and oldest trees, country by country, and preserving their genetics so they can be utilized for reforesting and rebuilding old-growth forests now.
Now, the whole thing about that, as far as these trees are concerned, I'm going to advance up here and just look at this vista, which is absolutely fantastic. But this whole thing about being able to clone the trees, tell us a little bit about what cloning means, because you know it has different definitions and meaning to people depending on who you are and maybe how you understand what that term actually means.
Sure. Let's start here. Almost every tree species on planet Earth is self-cloning, so they do it themselves. What we're doing is just assisting nature. We don't alter the genetics one bit. We follow the practices that these trees do for themselves, and we're cloning them so that we can preserve their genetics. But we don't change any of the genetics. We don't do anything that is not natural to the tree itself. And you just have to say, well, why is this important? Well, one species of tree that we've been working with are the coast redwood, California, and 96% of all the old-growth coast redwoods have been cut down. They're gone. So we now have a genetic fingerprint for several thousand years of how these trees were able to survive and thrive. And if we are in hopes to rebuild these old-growth forests that were destroyed, of course we'd want to use old-growth forest genetics. What the world does not know is that most trees' genetics have not been studied. It's too expensive, and trees' genetic fingerprint is 2.5 times as long as a human fingerprint. So it's expensive. They couldn't see any value until now. But now that we enter deeper and deeper into the 6th great extinction, which we are, and also we're faced with the tremendous environmental challenges that we all are facing everywhere on this planet, climate change being one of them, the old-growth forest genetics just might be the ticket to rebuild the forest that could pull us out of this climate change scenario we find ourselves in.
Yeah, looking at this very complicated chart we have here, it gives you parts per million and absorption rates and all other kinds of things. And this is kind of the carbon cycle among trees, the earth, and the atmosphere. How does this work, and how does this impact our daily lives on a day-to-day basis?
Well, trees are like the skeleton. If we were going to use a human body for an analogy, the trees are sort of like the skeleton of the body of planet Earth. They're the building blocks that, each tree in itself is a small ecosystem, independent, and it's thousands of different types of microorganisms, mammals, are reliant upon that tree, that ecosystem of that tree, for their survival. When you cut down 96 to 98% of all the old growth forests, like we have here in the United States, and 99% of all old growth forests in the UK, you've really dismantled the natural ecosystems that clean our water, clean our air, produce our oxygen, sequester the toxins and poisons and CO2s out of the atmosphere. It's akin to unplugging the filter system in an aquarium.
Yeah,
Aquariums don't last very long with the filter system unplugged, and we're finding out that we're not lasting very long when we unplug the natural filter system of our forest.
Yeah, and that's just like in the human body you're talking about, as far as the liver, the spleen, the kidneys, and all these other things that actually do the work for us, regardless of what we're taking in to the body. But also, too, David, my understanding of the most recent research is that these trees are actually networked over dozens, maybe even hundreds of miles, as long as there's a continuous lattice work of the root system, and so that they're able to, in essence, communicate and really do things that are needed as far as the earth is concerned, that relates to moisture, the soil, and all that. Have you found anything in your research, anything in your findings that would endorse or would actually reinforce that supposedly new research?
Yes, definitely. There are a number of new books on the science of trees that are out. One being The Man Who Planted Trees by Jim Robbins. That book came out about 3 years ago, and some of the scientific breakthroughs that's in Jim's book that you can read for yourself is that trees talk to each other. Trees have feelings and they can feel pain. There's a whole bunch of very, very interesting and paradigm shifting attributes and services that trees perform for us, all mammals, all living things, that we didn't know about even as short as 10 years ago. So yes, but the problem is our forests are so segmented, just little pieces and little bits here and there that aren't connected, that it's difficult for the mammals, for the birds, for all things, including the trees, to try and survive in these unconnected segments. And we've done a really good job of doing that continent by continent, country by country, destroying all of our old growth forests before we could study them, before we even knew what they did for us. And we've chopped everything up into subdivisions and trailer parks and little man-made, non-old growth, non-connected forests. We've urbanized the planet.
Yeah, this whole thing of these monocultures as far as the forest is concerned is a real issue for many different reasons. One is that we've lost many of our native species, but also, two, is the impact that they have as far as the weather conditions within these local communities, whether it's too dry, too wet, the stormwater runoff control, and all these other kinds of things. So there's real negative impacts. But looking at these, the photos you have here as far as the research and doing the cloning, and now we've gone to the gentleman actually collecting the seedling. Tell us a little bit about what you're actually taking from these trees to use for increasing the seedlings that you're developing within your laboratory.
All right, that would be a question for our climbers. We have 4 or 5 of some of the best big tree climbers on Earth that work with Archangel, and that's being headed up by my son Jake Milarch. He's the lead climber, and their task is to find and locate and climb and clone the largest and oldest living things on Earth, which of course is trees. So we were just a month ago, about 30 of us, in the old-growth giant sequoias in Southern California, in the Sierra Nevada range. And the first problem that you're going to do with trees that are 300 plus feet tall is that you have to get up into the tree, climb to the top of these trees, then go out to the end of the branches and cut last year's new growth. So it's really dangerous. It's very difficult, and there's very few climbers that have that skill set to do that. But what we're looking for is last year's new growth. They take pieces of, I would say probably 100 different pieces, 2 to 3 inches long, from the very tips of the end of the branches, as high up as they could go. Those pieces would be 3 to 6 inches long. It doesn't hurt the tree one iota. And they bring that down 200 to 300 feet back to the ground. We put it in a cooler with some ice and some moisture and overnight it back to our lab. That's the tissue that we're looking for. It doesn't really matter what the tree species is or what country it's in. That's the procedure. That's find the tree, climb the tree, go to the top, out to the outside branches, gather last year's new growth, bring it down, and get it to the lab as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm looking at these photographs here, and the guy sitting out, and I was going to let Rich ask a question, but we just about run out of time, so we'll ask it following on. So looking at this new seedling here, so once it goes into your laboratory, you start the seedling process. How long does it take to go from that seedling in your laboratory to where it actually can go out into the forest and be planted? And we only have about 30 seconds left, and I got one last quick question for you, David, so you got to be quick.
About 18 months.
18 months?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a long process. What do you see for this type of process over the next 5, 10, 15 years? I know that you're almost one of the few doing this. What do you see for the future?
Well, the U.S. Forest Service just had a large convention or conference in Chicago a month ago, and the conference was titled, "We Need to Clone Our Old Trees." So the U.S. Forest Service is come to the realization that if we don't clone our old growth species of trees here in the United States, because of the fires and the drought, we're liable to lose it. All over the UK, China, there are people that are realizing the importance of gathering and preserving these trees.
David, we're going to lose you. This is David Milarch, co-founder, Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, as we create the Emerald Planet.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing, no?
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet TV, as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis, looking for what we call best of the best practices that are going on around the globe that are actually increasing the quality of life for a planet who's going to be adding about 2 billion new people by 2050. And so how do we provide the environmental quality at the same time the jobs and all the basic infrastructure that's needed to protect the planet at the same time to have economic viability? And we have a gentleman that's coming on that's going to tie all this together for us. This is David Milarch, who is the co-founder of Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, AATA. And sitting right beside me is Richard Lewis. Richard's a good friend of ours. He is the president of the Winfield Group and technology marketing officer of Augur Marketing. So thank you for being with us, Rich. And David, are you back with us by telephone?
Yes, I am.
I want to kick off a little bit about the name. Where did this come up? This is a very unique name, this Archangel Ancient Tree Archive. And after you describe that, we want to get into some of the mechanics of doing this whole thing. And but let's get the name first. What does it really mean, and how did you evolve this name?
Well, it hopefully will tell people that we are, for the first time in the history of the world, asking the largest, oldest trees on Earth to clone themselves with our help so that we can preserve their genetics. Well, in the United States alone, there's 870 different tree species, and worldwide there's thousands. So we thought we would ask and add the word Archangel for help from above, because it's a Herculean task.
That's fantastic. Well, I've always thought about where did this name come from, because Archangel, you don't actually see that very often, and then have it tied into your ancient, and of course you have the champion tree process. But looking at cloning these trees and the importance of that, one of the things that you talk about, and we're going to advance this story a little bit, is that whether you have a growth of pines that maybe were planted 20 years ago, or you have different oak varieties, maybe they're 75 to 100 years or whatever, you still need to have these old growth, these ancient trees as part of that forest. Tell us a little about why that is important, and also the percentage of the mix, and how do you know that?
Well, in a native old-growth forest, you have mother trees. Mother trees are usually some of the largest and oldest trees, and they are just what they are called, mother trees. They provide the seedlings to rebuild that forest. Most people don't understand that old-growth forest genetics have never been studied. It's too expensive and too time-consuming until now. And until Archangel Ancient Trees came along, no one really had much success with asking trees that are several hundred to several thousand years old to clone themselves with our help. So it's possible for the first time, because we can clone like redwoods and sequoias and oaks that are thousands of years old, we can rebuild old-growth forests, the ones that we've destroyed, utilizing the old-growth forest genetics. It's a pure strain because it's an exact genetic fingerprint of the tree that we cloned. So we could put back in a ratio of no more than 10% of clone trees to seedlings, because we want genetic diversity, and reintroduce the old-growth forest genetics into most any forest. We think it's important because these trees are living proof that something very positive has happened within the genetics of that tree for it to survive several hundred or several thousand years.
Now, this is something very interesting, David. You have this, and I haven't heard this before. You and I have talked quite a bit, but the trees are cloning themselves with your help. Let's unpack that for just a minute. What does that really mean about the trees that clone themselves with your help?
virtually every species of trees is self-cloning. That means they are able to reproduce themselves exactly in clones. And what we do is we just follow the tree's lead and try and study the tree. How does that tree self-clone? What method does it use? I know of no man alive that can create life. I know no man alive that could make a butterfly or make a leaf. So we try and coax the tree into helping us allow it to self-clone so we can save those genetics. But we don't change the genetics in any way. We only assist nature in self-cloning. But it's been tried by organizations all over the world, and to our knowledge, no one's been able to clone 3,000, 4,000-year-old redwoods, sequoias, 1,000-year-old oaks in Ireland, to our knowledge. But we have a pretty good research lab here and propagation facility in Michigan, and we have some very dedicated people that if it takes 2 years and thousands of attempts, they don't quit until we get it. But we think it's rather important for everyone listening that they do.
Yeah, it's just incredible, and we're showing this one of these news reports of planting the trees, and I'm going to leave that up. But Richard has a question, David, he wanted to share with you.
Sure. Yeah, this is very interesting. It's great what you're doing, David. Real quick, there's a term which threw me off guard. I didn't know what it was. It's pretty simple, though. Phytoremediation, a low-cost solar energy-driven cleanup. Basically, doing what you're doing is using trees to clean up the environment. Can you explain that a little bit or expand on it?
Sure. It's the job that they've been doing tirelessly 24/7 for several hundreds of millions of years. 300 million years ago, this planet was not livable by mammals or human beings, somewhere around there, because of too much carbon in the atmosphere. Well, the apex forests are the end of a long process of coming from the oceans, of course, through the food chain, up the food chain, and the forests are the ones that produce the oxygen that all mammals, including humans, need, and they eat or they live on CO2 out of the atmosphere, so they give us our oxygen CO2 balance. That's one of the jobs they do. They also have aerosols that are really critical to stop endemic diseases from growing around the planet and the globe, keeping everything happy and healthy. There are so many things, so many jobs that trees do for us that we didn't even know. We didn't have the science to know until 10 years ago. But one of them is phytoremediation. Let's take black willows. Black willows grow in the eastern half of the United States, from Canada all the way to northern Florida, and they're probably the most important tree that we could replant. We've cut almost all of them down for a better view of the river or the lake or the ocean before we knew exactly what the black willows did with phytoremediation. Black willows, by the way, are what we found aspirin in a couple hundred years ago, but in the root hairs of the black willows, they could take in every form of dioxins. They could take in mercury. They could take in all the toxins and the poisons, and they convert those through phytoremediation, or store what they can in their trunks and in their roots to hold and sequester the poisons and the toxins in our water as well as our air. So phytoremediation is removing the unwanted or the toxins or the heavy metals or whatever that might be out of the water, the air, and storing them safely until we can dispose of them at the end of the tree's life.
Now, looking at this tree, and I think this is from Ireland because you're working all around the globe, but you got this huge old growth tree. It's looks like it's about 5 or 6 trunks on this fantastic base. But what's the nature of this particular tree? One, its longevity, but secondly, how it's actually impacting in a very positive way. And I think you just talked with Richard about this photo remediation, but also cleaning not only just the air, but also the water and the soil at the same time.
Exactly, that's phytoremediation. And we found out just recently, within the last 10 years, that as a tree gets larger and older, it actually grows faster. We thought that they slowed down. Well, we were wrong. In the case of ghost redwoods and giant sequoias, there's hard scientific evidence that the trees sequester more CO2, and they sequester more of the dioxins and the negative things that we don't want in a greater volume and faster as they get older. So just in the case of phytoremediation, we need to clean up our waterways. Wherever you're listening to this show or watching it, is it safe for you to go to your local river and take the water out of your river and drink it? Is it clean enough to drink? I think not. How about your groundwater? If you live in a major metropolitan area, is your groundwater clean enough to drink without being treated? No. That's because we've unhooked a natural filter system of this planet. When we deforested this planet, which we have done, we've done a really good job of that. It's akin to taking the filter out of our aquarium. How long would your aquarium last if you unhook the filter system? Well, that's exactly what we've done when we've clear cut and cut down 98% of our old growth forests here in the United States, 99% in the UK, and as we destroy our old growth rainforest, we're unplugging the natural filter system that cleans our water, our air, and our soil.
David, we're just about running out of time, so I want to give you two quick questions here. One is about replugging this filtration system. How are we doing that with trees? And then what do you see for the growth and development of expanding forest, say, over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And we have about 1 minute, and that's we've got to be out.
In the United States, we've cut down 98% of our old growth forest. We need to rebuild that filter system, and the skeleton, or the larger components of rebuilding that ecosystem, of course, is the trees. But we don't want to stop just with the trees. We want to use the understory trees. We want to use the native plants and bushes, like dogwoods, give off an aerosol that's very important for the health of all mammals, believe it or not, and their pollen. We need to rebuild our ecosystems, even in our urban areas, to help assist bringing back all the native plants, animals, birds, and pollinators to put things back into balance.
And that should have been done yesterday, right, David?
We never should have taken them down to begin with.
Got it.
We didn't know better.
All right, David Milarch of the AATA as we create the Emerald Planet.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800-RUNAWAY.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we're looking around the globe on a week-to-week basis for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, of course the processes and the leaders as we go through the 21st century. And as we move to a planet that may have some 9 billion people by 2050, could be as many as 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how we're going to be able to have the quality of life on a planet at the same time to provide the standard of living and the infrastructure that's needed. And of course, one of those infrastructures is the forest, and the forests directly relate to the quality as far as air, soil, and water. And we have a real expert at this, and also he's been very active not only with the trees, but involving youth and setting up educational programs, and I'm going to let him talk about some of that. This is David Milarch, who is the co-founder of the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, AATA as it goes by. And then sitting right beside me is a good friend of ours that comes on Emerald Planet TV on a fairly regular basis. This is Richard W. Lewis, who is the president of the Winfield Group and the technology marketing officer at Augur Marketing. And Rich, we're always glad to have you. David, are you back with us by telephone?
We sure are. We're here.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about this STEAMed program that you've created with teachers, administrators, and I guess even university faculty. What does that mean? Because that's really elongating the STEM concept of education. And then we're going to talk about how that relates back to Archangel and cloning these trees and expanding forest all over the planet.
Yes, I'd be glad to, Sam. Archangel Ancient Trees. You can go on our website and see a lot of wonderful pictures of administrators, schools, K through 12, universities, especially the students, and what we created called Tree School. So what in the world is Tree School? Tree School is exactly what it sounds like. We go into the schools or the universities and we work with usually the biology department people and also the students from grade 4 through university and teach them everything that we know how to do on how to clone trees. In other words, how to make trees, thousands of trees. Teach the students, teach the faculty, share with what we've learned, and show them that in their schoolroom, in a very small area, they can start to produce thousands of trees, even 4th and 5th graders, that they can later plant around their campus of their school, in their neighborhoods, along their streets, and start to rebuild the urban forest and the ecosystem of where they live. That's what we call Tree School.
Now, looking at the STEAM, this science, technology, environment, engineering, arts, mathematics, economics, and design. That is a very long acronym, and it covers a lot. There's much in there. Why did you package this? Because, you know, STEM is, you know, it's a 4-letter acronym, and now you've elongated that. What did you find in this that's important that may have been lacking as far as just the various STEM courses?
Hands-on teaching of youth of how to do what it's going to take to rebuild the ecosystems wherever they may live with the tools that they have available, in teaching those students, empowering those students, or propagating the propagators, or teaching the students how to be proactive and take it into their own school classroom and their own school and teach them everything that they'll need to know to be successful in helping reestablish and rebuild the ecosystem of wherever they live, Sam.
Now, having them involved in going to this cloning, I know this is something that's very important to you because this is an all-natural process. And as you keep saying, is you're just really helping the trees to do something they've been doing naturally for hundreds of millions of years. What is the feedback you get from students when you start talking about this and they start seeing these tiny little growth on the ends of the trees? Some of these are, you know, 300 or 400 feet up in the air, and then all of a sudden you come up with a seedling that we're looking at right here. They can take home and actually plant in their own yard.
Well, it's called empowerment. We're trying to empower each of the students as well as their teachers, as well as each of the schools that we go into or universities. We give them the tools, and in a very short time, in a matter of just a few hours, we teach them everything they need to know on how to reproduce and clone the great trees of their area. It's one of the most soul-satisfying things I've ever done, Sam, is to go into a school of, let's say a classroom of 40 or 50 fifth grade or sixth grade kids, and 2 hours later, with the help of their biology department, teach those kids how to clone like willows. So they're able to plant, that class could plant thousands of willows along their rivers and streams and lakefronts or their wetland areas and start to phytoremediate and help improve the quality of life for all living things in that area. They love it because it's hands-on. We insist that everybody participate. We make it fun. We're moving around, and we bring the plastic trays, and we bring the material so they can begin to do it right away, our first visit. So we teach them, give them the tools and the material to start to rebuild the urban forest that they live in, Sam. And these kids just go wild. Our experience is they can't get enough of it fast enough because it's something that they're doing that they can see real, weighable, measurable, tangible results just within a couple of weeks.
Looking at this scene that we have here with the faculty members and also the students, how do you involve the parents so that actually this walks home with the students? They have this conversation, you know, somehow in the household, however that may be, depending on their cultural imperative, and all of a sudden you're having this ripple effect throughout the community by engaging not only the students, the faculty, administration, but also involving the parents.
Well, the kids do a darn good job of that for us, Sam. And in a matter of a few short weeks or 2 months, they'll take home a couple of dozen of these trees that they've cloned and they've grown and propagated in their classroom. They take them home and say, we need to find a spot to plant these. So they're probably the best advocates we could possibly ever want by them taking home these little trees and saying, Mom and Dad, you need to help me plant these. We need to find a good home for these new trees. Now, I did this, so these are about me, and we need to take care of these because I did this. And it works out real well that way, Sam.
And that's they become very protective of those trees then because they're involved.
Oh, yes, because they did it. It's not something that was done for them. They learned out and they did it. It's their trees. So they take 100% accountability and responsibility to make sure their trees live. It works well.
Now, looking at, we have this scene here on this American Variety Radio. You're interviewed by this Court Lewis, and I know that you've really been leveraging on the media. You're on all different kinds of media. How is that really helping you as far as impacting in the local communities so that more and more people learn about this process? And the fact is that elementary school children can do it, and it's very simple.
Well, there's like 2 or 3 questions within that question. The media is a very, very valuable tool, and that is spreading information about the project, who we are, we're a nonprofit, and why we're doing what we're doing. So it's spreading information worldwide. We've been blessed with lots of global stories. We've got another new story coming out next week, Associated Press, has a world story come out on our cloning 3,000-year-old giant sequoia. So the media is a messenger. The media also carries our website of AATA and how you can get a hold of us. And as people read it, we hear from about 160 to 165 countries a year saying, we need help. Our water is not fit to drink. It's too hot. It's all these environmental dilemmas that people all over the world are finding themselves. So It also is a way for them to connect with us and start to communicate, say, okay, this is what we have to offer, this is how we can help you. So it's the beginning information spreader as well as a connector to our website, Archangel Ancient Trees website, so we can begin that process, Sam.
Rich has a question. I brought these seedlings back up, and he's got a question concerning that.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
A quick question, real quick, interesting fact off of the internet. Trees absorb carbon dioxide and potentially harmful gases, et cetera, et cetera. How are you helping, and how many trees have you planted, and how many forests, and what's the potential for the future for numbers of trees?
Okay, an average 12-inch diameter tree here in Washington, D.C. produces enough oxygen for a family of 4 for the year.
Let's state that again, David. That's an interesting factoid. What was that again? One tree?
A maple tree or any of the trees that grow in the Washington, D.C. area that you're familiar with, a 12-inch diameter trunk tree, a foot across, 4 feet above ground level, produces enough oxygen for a family of 4 for the entire year.
That's incredible. What a story.
So if every family would plant just 1 tree a year, that tree would eventually produce enough oxygen, not only for themselves, they would be paying it forward for 20 or 30 other families. And we have to start thinking proactively about paradigm shifts of what people can do, what you could do with very little money or no money at all as a family to help protect and help ensure your grandchildren's future. And that's one fact that, geez, you mean we only have to plant 1 tree a year, the 4 of us, to produce enough oxygen? Yes. That will produce enough oxygen for your family. Well, there are a lot of proactive things that you can find on our website of AATA. It's like phytoremediation of heavy metals, dioxins, and mercury out of our water.
Give us that URL, David, because we're running out of time. We've got only about 30 seconds left. What's your URL so people can find you?
It's Archangel Ancient Trees. Just Google up Archangel Ancient Trees, and there's lots of global stories, and it'll guide you on how to get to our website. Just Google up Archangel Ancient Trees. It's the easiest way, Sam.
Okay, gotcha. This is David Milarch, co-founder of Archangel Ancient Tree Archive. Thank you for being with us, David, and thank you as we create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org. or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet TV, as we come to you on a week-to-week basis looking in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the best practices that are going to take us not only to exist as we move through the 21st century, but even as we add 2 billion new people to increase the quality of life. And one of those things is that we have to improve the air, water, and soil quality. And to do that is we need to have more and more trees and more forest, and those forests need to be connected. And we have a gentleman coming on that actually is an expert at that, and I should say he's the evangelist of trees. David Milarch, can I call you that?
Yes, you can.
David is co-founder of Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, and he and his family have created a very dynamic organization up in Michigan, which now is worldwide. And then sitting right beside me is Richard W. Lewis, who's a good friend of ours and has Augur Marketing and also the Winfield Group. And we're always glad to have you with us, Rich.
Thank
you. We're going to be talking about this reforestation in this particular show, David, and I'm going to bring up this first big, huge tree that's hundreds of feet tall and looks like it's as big around as a tank. Why is it so important that we go back to these original sources? You're saying that we've eliminated 98% of the old growth trees, but yet with all this cloning that's going on in a very natural way, you're actually helping to turn the tide. So tell us why these trees are important, and then how is Archangel actually trying to, not only trying, but reversing that trend of losing these ancient and very important trees?
Well, in every forest in the United States and in North America, usually some of the biggest and most important trees in that forest, the old growth trees, are called the mother trees. Those are the trees that actually produce millions and millions of seedlings a year for Mother Nature and make sure that the forest is reforested with the oldest, strongest genetic material available. Well, of course, as we've cut down our forests 4, 5, or 6 times in most cases across the United States, state by state, the biggest trees always were the first to go. So what we've done is we've cut down virtually 98% of all of our mother trees, the largest, oldest, strongest trees that produce the healthiest forest. And after, of course, we deforest an area, we take the biggest, strongest, healthiest trees and we leave the junk. Well, if you deforest a forest 3 or 4 times, you've left the junk of the junk of the junk genetically. Mm-hmm. And now that we need trees more than ever, with climate change here, and also as we enter into the 6th great extinction, we need those trees for their abilities to filter our air and our water and our soils more than ever and sequester CO2, provide shade, and it's critical. It's critical to everyone listening that your grandchildren, we better put those forests back so that the quality of life that we know would be available in 50 years, which it won't be if we don't, Sam.
Now, looking at the forest, I know that you say 10% of the trees and whatever the forest may be, and you'd be planting, in essence, hardwood, say, in a pine forest, something like that. But yet you have this cross-pollination as far as the best genes coming out of these mother trees going in to these the new growth areas, if you will. But I think you said you wanted a critical mass of like 200 trees or something like that. Explain why you need this critical mass. And so those trees then are actually connected together, and they in turn are, through a ripple effect, impacting all those trees throughout however large an area that may be?
Well, we're cloning the largest and oldest trees area by area, state by state, country by country around the world. We're trying to. We're a nonprofit. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So as the funding comes in, we're cloning the largest and oldest of each species. And why are we doing that? Well, let's take a coast redwood. Most people don't know that very, very few redwoods live to be 1,000 years old. The redwoods we are cloning are 2,000 to 3,000 years old, and nobody knows how or why. The old-growth forest has never been studied, those genetics. How can those trees live 2 or 3 times as long as the normal tree? Well, it's genetic. So we're using those trees, the largest, oldest, strongest genetics, to reintroduce those genetics into the seedling forests of whatever species that might be. They've proven themselves. They've lived 2,000 or 3,000 years. They're still healthy. They're still here. They're still growing, and they're on the job. We think it's important that after our forests have been high-graded, or all the best trees have been cut down a number of times, that we reintroduce those strong genetics into those fragmented forests that have been cut over so many times, and we've taken the best of the best. So it's a way of upping the genetic standard of each forest, wherever that might be and whatever species it is, Sam.
Yeah, I think we have an image of this, and Richard Lewis wanted to ask you a question about that very point. So thank you for bringing that up, David.
There's a term that I saw that is great. If you could explain what a monoculture is and why you're not doing that. That
a monoculture is what we're planting every city in America with. Most people don't realize the Crimson King, the tree, the maple tree with the red leaf, purplish red leaf, all the trees that we're planting in our cities are monocultures. Or they're one tree that's cloned, and we put monocultures as we've taken down the natural forest and we're rebuilding our urban forest. We're doing it with nothing more than monocultures. As we put back, which is very little, the Forest Service and other organizations put back the native forests that we're cutting down, they're using monocultures. Monocultures opens you up for, if a disease comes into your city or your neighborhood or your national or your state forest, it can wipe out that whole species because it's a monoculture. It's a very, very foolish way to reforest a city, a forest, or anything by using a monoculture of one clone tree. And that's exactly what we've been doing for 100 years.
Yeah, I know that's something with the Forestry Department and the Department of Environment and also Energy within Washington, D.C., they've made your very point just in the last couple of years, saying they have to diversify the types of trees, variety of trees that are planting throughout the city, and they want to take the city from about a 30+% canopy to, they say, over 40% canopy. So when we talk about urban areas, 80% of the American population now live in what would be considered urban areas. It's no longer the wild frontier as we think of America. So when you talk about canopy and urban areas, David, what does that really mean, going back to this monoculture, but also how do you introduce these old growth trees that are thousands of years old into a city that may be 125, 150, 200 years old, and they have subdivisions that may have just actually started in the last 5 or 10 years?
Well, we have to readjust our thinking. We have to think more intelligently about what we plant in our yards, our schools, our churches, along our roadways. We have to be more intelligent than we have been in the last 100 years, because primarily we've planted with trees that look pretty. I call them French poodles. They have a pretty color leaf or a pretty flower, and very little thought was ever given to longevity of the tree, or is it a native species that helps all the pollinators, the birds, the mammals? Is it an asset, or is it just something pretty to look at that really doesn't help the situation after we've cut down the old growth forest or we've deforested every urban area? So we need to start thinking more intelligently, and we need to start using more native trees, trees that are good for all the pollinators, the mammals, and part of the solution, not part of the problem, Sam.
Now we have this huge tree here, and so this would be one of your ancient and old growth trees, maybe a champion tree, and you see the smaller trees around it. It looks like this may even be this monoculture. We're talking about a lot of maybe white pine or spruce or something like that, but you have this old growth tree right there. And so through its boughs and through the leaf structure and the roots, what is it actually doing? How does it transmit these life-extending properties to these other trees that are not even within the same species?
Well, we know trees talk to each other, and we have hard science to prove that now. They talk to each other through their root systems. The mother trees will also send nutrients to the young trees or the baby trees or whatever it is they might need. The mom tree knows that. The baby trees communicate it. She supplies that. So it's only been very recently that we understood that trees do talk to each other. It's like a large network in our forest. When we've segmented our forest, and in most cases we've clear-cut and bulldozed all the forests away, we're putting back trees that really don't talk to each other and really aren't part of the solution. They don't fight or remediate the soils, the air, and the water like we'd like to see happen, Sam, but there's some good books, one of them being The Man Who Planted Trees. I highly recommend that people read it. It's by Jim Robbins. Jim Robbins is the New York Times Science Times reporter. And a lot of these new discoveries, scientific, hard science discoveries that are so promising, are within that book, The Man Who Planted Trees. And another thing that trees do, another service, is aerosol. The aerosol out of their leaves, and in a lot of cases out of the root systems, life-giving antibiotics, life-giving properties to these aerosols that's critical for all mammals and all living things. And when we cut the trees down, we eliminate that aerosol that keeps the health balance of our birds, our bees, our butterflies, as well as our humans. There's fascinating new science that all of the things that trees do for all of us that's so critical at this time, Sam.
David, we have about 15 seconds, so got to be quick. You're a great storyteller, but what do you see for this type of activity over the next 5, 10, 15 years to improve the stock and the quality of our forest?
We either put it back with strong native species, or we're really in trouble as human beings, this species.
Well, this is David Milarch. He's a co-founder of Archangel Ancient Tree Archive. Right beside me is Richard Lewis of Augur Marketing and the Winfield Group. And thank you for being with us as we talk about this fascinating topic of old-growth trees, the mother trees, and the importance of these as we try to expand the forest as we create the Emerald Planet.